Oh, great. Okay, hello, and okay, I'm going to start again.
Can't even fucking say hello.
I can't even say hello. God, take 45. Hello, and welcome to Belfast, sunny Belfast.
Yeah,
it's been not so much today, but it's a beautiful day yesterday. Barry, my dear friend, who you all know, this will also be on your Patreon or whatever, is in town. You're doing a couple of retreats with a friend.
Yeah.
So stay with me for a couple of days, and usually whenever you stay, we try and do at least one kind of conversation online. One conversation between us.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, and that's it.
The rest of the time.
We don't talk the rest of the time. And one conversation
actually,
for you.
not that far from the truth.
I know, God, yes. We're both very reclusive. It's lovely hanging out with you, actually,
it really
in the apartment.
Because there's no pressure.
Yeah, we chat for like 10, 15 minutes and just go off and do our own thing.
Yeah.
You go for long walks at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And it all works very well. And by the way, Barry was just showing me, show this book. This is beautiful. This is book 23.
Yes, I when I moved, I used to call them "fuck off." It was like self-talk.
Yeah.
But then I moved to a more general "fuck it." So I call every journal "fuck it," and I started with number 1 when I moved back to London. So I'm on number 23.
Yes, he's at the young age of.
Yeah.
That makes you 30? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's just.
Show just to flick through there. Just, I mean, I know you're not allowed to show the stuff, but look at that. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. It's just, I guess, it's how your mind works, right?
Yeah, it's how your mind works. And you actually, you're the one who thought of a couple of questions we could chat about.
I mean, I figured it's early on a Monday morning.
Yes.
So why not talk about the meaning of life?
Perfect.
So I mean. It's something I've been thinking about. I mean, this year, we've done already a couple of things together, and we're going to do some more things together. And I've just been thinking a lot about the whole world of radical theology, life in general, really. And just a few days ago, I was like, okay, so there's like a central idea, I think, in radical theology, but also in psychoanalysis, I think, that sits not necessarily in opposition to life, but counterintuitive to the way life is often kind of described. And for me, it sort of revolves around this whole idea of how you think about the shape of your life. I mean, so whether someone actually embraces wholeheartedly the idea of the death of God, and we talk with people who I think are at various points along that journey, but for most of the people that we communicate with, there's a lot of post-religious belief stuff to work through, and the question of, well, how do you think about the shape of your life after the death of God? If you grew up in Christianity of some form or another, then you were constantly told God has a plan for your life. There's some inherent meaning behind it all. If you're out in the world, even before, without Christianity, you have the whole idea that there's purpose. Your life has ultimate meaning, and your goal is to find purpose. And it seems to me that there's a difference between finding purpose and coming to terms with like the instinctual drives of the subject that like psychoanalysis talks about. So I wondered like what you thought about this idea. If your life isn't assigned by the universe, by God, by some invisible purpose that you have to find that will make you complete or whole, and you're in this world where you can choose that or not choose that, how do you, I hope this is making sense, but how do you think about the whole idea of what do you do about your life after the death of God?
Yes.
Do you search for meaning? What do you do? Easy question.
I know it's very good, but I mean, like I would define modernity. I think one of the definitions of modernity, and I think it's a thread among various thinkers. And I'm doing a book study on Altheiser's, at the moment, and so it's very much an Altheiser is modernity. And if we kind of start modernity, maybe in the 1600s or something like that, is when the question of meaning and purpose really kind of arises as a question. So even the fact that people grew up asking the question, what is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? Is a modern question.
It's a modern question,
And it's a modern question because when the question like that arises, it's because you don't feel meaning and purpose, right? So you go back far enough, that was just not a question you asked. You kind of knew what you were doing. You were
placed assigned.
You were assigned a place in the world. You did it. Whether it wasn't necessarily a good place, but you knew where you were born. You knew when you were going to die, what your job was, what your parents' job was. It was kind of all kind of assigned. So this sitting around asking the existential question of what is the meaning of life, just I'm sure it occurred to some people or at times, but it was not some predominant thing. In modernity, and this is what Barry's referring to as the death of God, because one meaning of that in the academy is the loss of a foundation where you know your place in the world, where you know what you're doing. So in modernity, there is this sense in which we, and in Altheiser's terms, it's we discover that it's not that everyone had the answer to that question necessarily, but the questions didn't even arise, right?
An age throws up its questions.
It throws up the questions. So it actually throws up something that is true and is universal, which is the question of what am I supposed to do in the world, and how am I supposed to act, and who should I talk to and who should I not? Like the question of, and this is why anxiety is central to modernity. Is anxiety is the affect that arises out of not knowing what you should do in a given situation. So how should I act? What in that party, in relationships? What does the world want from me? So modernity is marked by the rise of anxiety, the rise of the question of meaning, the rise of the question of purpose, and existentialism was one of the philosophical movements that really give words to that. And so when Jean-Paul Sartre was interesting, because he would say that even if you're a religious believer, right, who believes absolutely God is communicating with you, you still have to take responsibility for that. So you still have to go, well, maybe it's madness, or maybe it's I'm having a breakdown, or maybe it was just kind of like this is my unconscious, maybe it's God. So even when you go, God is speaking to me, you still have to take responsibility for deciding whether that's God or not.
That's that Julia Kristeva, that I really like that book of hers, This Incredible Need to Believe, where she talks about this, and her take on religion is quite different than Freud. She doesn't think it's necessarily just an illusion. She thinks that but she thinks that in the modern world, the belief drive is challenged by the sort of knowledge drive of the modern world. Like we constantly live with this tension of, yes, you might still believe in God, but here's science and rationality and logic, and you have to, so you sort of live, her sort of take, I think, it's me putting words into her mouth, is that everybody's a sort of, even the most ardent believer is forced to be a sort of a skeptic at any given points in the day, because questions arise, like was that pizza?
Yes.
Was that the onions that made me have that wild dream that I think was God talking to me, or something like that?
Absolutely. And then if you have even the certainty of purpose, I believe it's kind of like can be a reaction formation in response to this existential dread that kind of marks us as modern subjects. And again, modernity not in the last 50 years, but in the last 400 years, but that the modernity is annoyingly marked by dread, anxiety, and ways to try to cover over that.
Which is why I understand the tendency in light of that to embrace,
Oh yeah.
to try and find some foundation
Yes.
for living,
Yes.
and I think one of the challenges for people who had that in a version of a brand of Christianity maybe that they were born into or they encountered, but now they've kind of gone not so much, but the tendency is then to try and find some other foundation.
Yes.
Like, people exchange the word God for universe or,
Yes.
something else. And there's always this tendency to be looking for this something that will free you from the anxiety of having to choose, even though we want to be choosing subjects, because the assignation of life can be liberating on one level. It's like, tell me what to do. I mean, and I think we all get there are moments in life where we all go, oh God, I just wish somebody would just tell me what to do right now. We ask our friends, or we ask the God we don't believe in, please tell me what the fuck to do, because so the challenge though is, if you don't believe in that kind of foundationalist notion, what then? What's your take on that? Like,
and for me,
because I really liked your description of the death of God as linking it to modernity and not just to a theistic notion, because I think that's how I sort of view it. When you talk about the death of God, you're talking about living in the modern world, really, where you've become this individual. You've become an atomized individual who essentially you can do whatever you like with your life. Sounds great on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I'm interested in, again, is it's kind of like, what do we all share in common? So forget about beliefs. Like, all to be a modern subject is to experience, the death of God. In one sense, sociologically speaking, it's like, as you said, as modern subjects, you can't escape the sense of the question of meaning, the question of purpose. Two of the predominant responses to that, which Nietzsche draws out as one of the great thinkers at the of modernity, is, as you said, foundationalism or nihilism. So two of the responses to this is, one is you frantically try to find a foundation, and you can find a foundation in religious belief or in what I suppose in philosophy called evidentialism. You kind of find a scientific basis, but you're trying to find a solid ground, right? So we see that a lot, and you mentioned it. And even as you mentioned, if you don't even intellectually believe that, you still might find yourself going like, I don't believe in tarot cards, but I still go and get them read. So it's a very powerful desire. And then nihilism, which Nietzsche...
which I might be a proto-nihilist.
Sorry, yes, there you go, absolutely, And Nietzsche almost go like, nihilism is almost like the waters in which we swim, really, again, is because... And for Nietzsche, these were very connected, foundationalism and nihilism. The search for a firm footing, and then at times whenever that lets us down, falling into nihilistic despair. So the question, of course, is, well, is there a way out of this, right? That's not the reactionary or the move to conserve, to go back, or somehow to. And within nihilism, I also put in a lot of religious nihilism, which is give up your desire, kind of become a living dead in a way, detach from the world completely, and kind of like don't hold on to anything. So there's religious nihilism as well. So
I think that's an important point, actually,
because that's one of the things that a lot of people, obviously are attracted to. Is desire is so painful because we never seem to get what we desire. It always lets us down. We find it painful and destructive, and so this idea of giving up desire entirely can be very attractive. Not if you're depressed, because depression is where you don't desire anything. Like depression is where you don't even want to get up out of bed. You can't. Your desire is not functioning at all. But then the positive side of that is some people are trying to free themselves from desire without falling into depression.
Yeah.
These are our various moves.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, no. Go.
Oh yeah.
You finish that thought.
Finish that thought. So
if you can.
Yes. The hints to the way some of the great artists and thinkers of the 20th century have tried to answer this, and there's a theological dimension to this, although, and this is what we work in, it hasn't really come to fruition in the same way as it has within things like psychoanalysis, but is that the way out is to go all the way in. And I think Simone Weil is one of the mystics of this kind of idea, which is that if we can never fulfill our desire, if we can never find a foundation that gives us ultimate meaning, something that gives us ultimate peace, and then the alternative is to try to give up our desire, which is fruitless as well, because we are creatures of desire. Someone like Weil says that the religious moment is when you desire itself. And for Paul Tillich, it's whenever you fully find meaning in the loss of meaning. So almost like, and in Todd McGowan's words, you start to enjoy what you don't have, right? So there's the mystical or the spiritual experience becomes the experience of enjoying dissatisfaction and finding meaning in this groundlessness, and trying to navigate what it means to say desire itself. That's a move. That's a very difficult move, but I think that's the right move.
I mean, I think I think the difficulty arises for the most part because we're so embedded in a world that doesn't want to face the fact that not that pleasure is fleeting, but it's not a permanent state. We have these notions that we're going to find bliss, and usually it's bliss in our cultural context at the moment seems to be mostly associated with complete detachment, so you let go of everything, and then because you've let go of everything, you're now in a state of bliss, which to me seems like it's problematic, because it seems like there's nothing actually in that when you sort of think about it. But we're constantly barraged with this idea, how to find happiness, how to have peak experiences. It's all, it's like I got fascinated earlier in the year. You know how things come up on your Instagram stories and stuff with all of this footage from Everest. All of these people climbing Everest, and it used to be like one person climbed Everest and they became a hero, and and everybody's like unbelievable. Now there's like lines of people waiting for hours to go up Everest, and they're not even climbers. It's just become this thing that you have to do, this peak experience thing. And there's this idea that living your best life, like there's the life you live in, but then there's this other life that you're supposed to have, or that you can have, that's full of just all of this energized, everything is peak, everything is over the top, and I think it creates this vacuum, and so.
But that insight then leads to its opposite, which is the other massive thing in society, which is to drop out, to kind of like to disconnect. So those are for me the two very
the
powerful,
pendulum swings. But they're very powerful and potent because they're everywhere.
They're
everywhere in the story, and we're sitting in the middle of this and going, maybe there's another way of looking at this. It's like, it's funny how we seem to have come down to this all or nothing game in life. It has to be, everything has to be complete fulfilled desire or no desire at all. And in the middle, you've got this other notion that perhaps we need to come to terms with maybe the inconsistency, the inconsistency of desire, or maybe our inconsistencies that make desire elusive to us.
I would say more than maybe. I'd say this is reality. That it doesn't matter what people believe, doesn't matter what people think, whatever. It's like we are creatures of desire, and we're creatures that are, as you say, kind of pulled and pushed by our desires, right? That's just to be a human, to be a creature. And we all, I myself included, like obviously, like we're drawn to trying to fulfill that desire. So desire is a type of lack. We feel this lack, we fantasize objects, we also find the struggle of desire. All of that's kind of going on. What I think modernity kind of, I say, exposes is that this is the truth for all of us. This is the universal kind of dimension. The thing that I think is animating this, and is that, and so this is where I take the shoulds and shouldn'ts out and all of that. And it's kind of like Todd McGowan's argument for capitalism, not for capitalism, but for why it works, is that it promises a type of satisfaction, but it actually delivers dissatisfaction. So its power lies precisely in it doesn't work. And that's a really interesting, that's a psychoanalytic insight, is that some people argue, capitalism works, and some people say, oh, it doesn't work. So one say it works because, it brings the level of wealth up, and it kind of like, poverty is diminished, et cetera, et cetera. Some people say it doesn't work, creates alienation, repressions, depressions. But this idea is, well, it works because it doesn't, is that because actually, weirdly, what we really enjoy is the pursuit. What we really enjoy is not getting. What really animates us is struggle, is sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is negation. And again, Altizer, he argues that at the heart of all religion, you get right back to the heart of religious ritual, it's all about sacrifice. And sacrifice is about negation, it's about giving something up. And so his name for God is the negative nothing, and then religion is the replaying of this nothing through sacrifice. And the idea is that sacrifice is what gives life meaning. So when Julie Reich, for example, says that being a mother is horrific and having a child is horrific, she means it. She absolutely means that having a child is like a form of death. It destroys your body, it destroys your sleep, it kind of, someone else is making these demands and you have to give up all of yourself. Like she paints a picture of being a mother as being...
You never, ever, ever want to have a kid.
This is absolute destruction. And she doesn't even give a but to that. But the but is in there. The but is almost like this horrific sacrifice is sublimated. It is, in the words of Altizer, apocalyptic, which is apocalypse for Altizer. It's an absolute end that is an absolute beginning. So it's an absolute end of your life, but it's also an absolute beginning. But it's not you love your child despite the sacrifice. It's kind of the love is because of the sacrifice. The love arises out of the soil of the absolute negation. So this is kenosis in theology, that there's a kenotic self-emptying, that in mythological terms of God.
And I actually think women probably understand that better than men, to be, without getting too much into gender, but having known a number of women in life who've gone through childbirth and have talked about the incredible pain, struggle, all of that stuff, and then a couple of years later do it again. You go, why would you put yourself through that? Well, the answer is it's in the cycle of what occurs. But
so you see there, like, this intimate connection between absolute negation and absolute positivity, being love. So again, when Lacan talks about love as basically negation, love is a type of attachment to lack, the nothing, the desire of the other, or whatever. But there's something about love that is intimately connected, because we think of love as the most positive, people say the most positive force in the universe, is simultaneously connected to the most negative force in the universe. There's something about death that and life that are intimately connected in love.
So do you think we need in life, like, sustainable purposes, or if not, like, do you think that life needs any particular purpose, or what if not?
Yeah. So if I very
I mean,
quickly,
I know that's a kind of strange way of putting it, but
that's great. If I outline kind of genealogy of how I think we got to the modern world, and then yes, what is, so you could say, right, in terms of this death of God thing, right, we'll go back to the Apostle Paul, who said there's something salvatory about the death of God, or something about it, so it starts off there. Luther kind of, what they say, kind of raises it to the dignity of theology, that this is, he kind of tries to create a theology of the death of God. Then Hegel is the first time where it enters into thinking, so it becomes thought, and he sees pure negativity. This negativity is as central to the very working of the universe. This then, you see this then within sciences, but after Hegel you have Nietzsche, in a sense, who then is like the Apostle Paul. Nietzsche sees that this negativity is salvatory. There's something about embracing the death of God that is salvatory, which is exactly what the Apostle Paul was saying, So then you have Nietzsche. Then what you have after Nietzsche, and this is what brings us to what we're talking about today, is the what could be called the recoil from that insight, right? This is kind of the words escaping me, but basically where you kind of go back, you kind of like you regress basically. So, and the regression is seen in kind of foundationalism and nihilism, in our frantic pursuits for meaning. Fundamentalism is one expression of that. Scientism is another. You've got all these new age woo-woo stuff. That's another. Lots of kind of attempts to avoid the insight of the death of God. And then you have, for me, Freud and Lacan, who are the technology of the death of God. So if that's kind of genealogy, you go like, what we're living in what we lived in the 20th century and the 21st century is the recoil from this idea that we have to, in Sartre's terms, we're condemned to freedom, that we have to somehow live with a certain anxiety that is being human, that we have to try to live with a certain kind of like horror that we don't know the answers, whatever we believe, and you can fervently believe something, it's wonderful, but even when you do, it's like you can't, as a modern subject, you can't get rid of the clawing whatever,
true. And you're never, and all of those kind of attachments that we make, those those symbolic identities, we're never fully them.
We're never fully them.
There's always something missing. Which is, I think, why people can sometimes hold on to them so tightly.
That's very good.
And that's very much, I think,
because
part of the condition that we find ourselves in at this particular juncture in life. It's like it's almost like a pot that's boiling, and it's bringing up this thing, and
well, that's what you're saying there was very good. It's like it's over the last 100 years, it's shown itself in different ways. Right now, it's showing itself in our obsessive attempts to create words to describe who we are. So I want a way to describe my sexuality, my gender, my place in life, my race, and you see this, like, it's an explosion of attempting to name, which you can see is exactly arising out of the anxiety that of what the existentialists showed us, which is we never fully identify with our identity.
Which is why I think it's interesting that in psychoanalysis you're a subject, not a self,
exactly.
And I think, again, but here we are, we're sort of talking about all of these things in a world where this is the lingua franca, it's the common language. Is how do you identify yourself? Who are you? Tell me who you are. Tell me your all of your definitions. And I don't just mean sexual ones. I mean just in general. I'm English, you're Irish.
And again, we're just diagnosing here. Like again, that's why I've never taken much of an interest in what people believe or think, including myself. What I'm interested in is what is the ground out of which the modern symptoms rise. So what we've offered here is like a diagnosis. So a diagnosis is like this notion of freedom. I mean, this is the word in philosophy. It's called freedom. Freedom is the idea almost like you experience that you don't know what you should do. Like you're a dog is a dog, a rock is a rock, but a human being is always, in a sense, asking what is it to be human. We're kind of having to decide how to act in the world. The affect of freedom is anxiety, and anxiety arises out of the death of God. And to be a modern subject, that's what we're feeling. So that's the diagnosis. The prognosis is probably that if we don't find a way forward, society will continue to corrode and corrupt, and will continue to silo into identity groups, and society will collapse. That's the prognosis. And then what is, which is what we're talking about, is what is then the
I wouldn't want to call it hope.
Yes, exactly.
What's the response?
What's the response? What's the medicine? And for me, the medicine is that society, we need to then, in the dialectical move, you never try to pull back, you never try to go back to something, you kind of almost always have to go deeply into, there's the affirmation, the position, you negate the negation, there's a pushing forward. So the movement that people like Tillich and Weil and Nietzsche and Sartre and various thinkers and Lacan do is to go, we have to go deeper into the meaninglessness. We need to go deeper into the experience of a lack of foundation. And we will then find a foundation in the lack of foundation. Which means, and this is really interesting for me, and then we can get really concrete about it, but I kind of go like, which means that, again, coming back to this idea of somehow realizing that actually not knowing, a certain form of unknowing, is what makes life meaningful and interesting. I mean, we've got this in modern science. Well, like scientists, for example, and any intellectual is more drawn by what they don't know than by what they do. Unknowing becomes not the place of suffering to overcome, but rather you start to see it for what it is, which is the motor force of desire.
Creativity. I mean, I had a thought in my head that just went off on I during the early days of the COVID lockdown, I reread Camus' The Plague. Which, I mean, it was a sort of obvious move
to never be at the connection there
to read it. You know what I mean? But there's just this moment, and it really sort of galvanized something for me, because the story, if you don't know it, it's worth a read. There's this plague that happens with rats, and it takes over this whole city, and everybody's arguing about the cause of it and all that stuff, and in the middle of it there's this doctor who's like working through it all. But there's this wonderful moment, because the book is it's sort of apocalyptic, it's Camus anyway, you know what I mean, but there's this moment where in the middle, at the height of the plague, he goes off and has a swim in the ocean, and for a moment there's this like respite from the plague of existence. And what it galvanized for me is that really that's how I think we have to come to terms with the world that we find ourselves in. That there are the moments where you find sublime beauty in the midst of the plague of existence. I mean, that sounds really dark, or maybe it doesn't. But I think that for me that's the way you work out. That's the way I sort of try and work forward. I'm not looking for this. It's a bit like when Jesus says, "The poor you'll always have with you." So that's not resignation. I don't think that's a resignation statement. I think that's a statement that you could look at and go, there's something inherent in that to be learned about what it means to be a subject alive on planet Earth. That this is, and that's where your desire is found, actually. Not in poverty, or not in the poor, or not the fact that the poor I think it's way bigger than that. The issue is not to try and eradicate this, that, or the other, but to live between the polarities.
Yes, I mean, it's we kind of in a popular way think of that we want to find a reason, like a purpose, a foundation, and then desire it. So that's we all think like that in a sense. Is like almost it feels like when you meet somebody, they are the thing that you desire. So they. Yeah. And they evoke your desire, right? So you find something. So even an apologist, you talk about, right, what is the purpose of life, and then we should desire it.
Yeah.
What modernity kind of, I think, reveals is that kind of desire comes first. Simone Weil has a really interesting kind of speculative theology for this. So in her vision, before space and time, before the beginning. We can't even imagine it really, but it's like the singularity is kind of like a total fullness and a total emptiness, right? So, Hegel talks about this as if you have pure being, not things, not cups and plates and TVs, but just pure being, just pure fullness. That's also equivalent to pure nothingness, because being without any characteristics is pure nothingness. So this pre-beginning is this space of pure fullness and pure nothingness, and all space, all time, nothing. And we can call that the Godhead. And, for Simone Weil, the first act of creation, and you get this in Schelling, is that a retraction. There can be no creation because there's no space to create anything. So the first thing that has to be created is space. So the Godhead retracts into itself so that there can be space for something. So the first creation is the creation of nothing, not the creation out of nothing, but the creation of nothingness first. And so for Simone Weil, then this first act of creation creates something and nothing. Yeah. So the first act of creation is the creation of something and nothing. So the first act of creation is the death of God. Because if God is everything and the nothing and the all space and all time, then the first act of creation is that God dies. This is why she has a theological atheism, because God does not exist. Yeah. God killed God's self for the universe to be. And then her name for this creation is desire. Desire is what is the residual effect of a loss, a fundamental loss of something we never had because we weren't around. So desire becomes fundamental to the universe, a sense of loss, a sense of longing, a sense in which something is gone, that actually is the creative force. And then for Simone Weil, then of course, then she's like, so desiring desire, realizing that desire is this fundamental feature. And then we grew up, and as we grew up in our historical circumstances, we learn that desire takes a shape. We start to desire certain things, but because desire is fundamental, no object can ultimately satisfy it, because desire is more fundamental. And in this vision, then and someone like Viktor Frankl, here's a very concrete example of it. Viktor Frankl would ask a patient, why do you not kill yourself? Because the idea for Frankl, I think this is in psychoanalysis very much so, is desire is always functioning. There's always, even if it's hardly functional, there's a reason why you haven't killed yourself. There's a reason. There's some desire, some enjoyment in life, and partly it's about discovering that. All of this to say that in this vision, it's like, it's not the question of what is the meaning of life. It's like, no, there already is meaning. You already have a way of answering that. You already have desires. They might be oppressive to you. They may not be working right. But in some respects, it's about coming to terms with how you desire. It's already functioning. And that swimming in the ocean was that doctor's way of expressing a desire for somebody else. That might be connecting matchboxes for somebody. But desire is functioning, and it's almost like...
Again, I think the challenge is that we live in a world that wants to continually extend desire. It's like for that guy that wrote that book on foreverism, that we don't have nostalgia now. We just want to keep everything going in the present. So, there's like 10, we just want to keep the cycle going. It's like we want eternity.
Yes,
manifested in the material world. And so our desire, it can't be truncated. It can't be the experience of the desire, and whatever it is, that's great. It's got, it's like love. We want to extend it. I will love you forever.
Yeah.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's bad if it doesn't last forever.
Yes.
That's to me, that's an important thing to consider in life. That something's limitation is not the worst thing about it. It's perhaps the best thing about it. Is that that desire doesn't last forever.
Yes.
That it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't fulfill completely.
Yeah.
But it never will, because it can't.
Yes.
Because to be human is to experience the momentary nature,
Yes.
I mean, the American thing of the pursuit of happiness. You're chasing it. You're not. There is no getting it.
Yes. But for me, and for me, there is no shoulds and shouldn'ts here. It's like, because we're all, in psychoanalysis is interesting, is like you're already expressing desire, even being an analysis. Our desire and our pleasure is always already at work. The interesting thing is to potentially uncover, how that desire is operating, how that desire is working. And why am I saying that? It's partly because it's like, well, I'm saying it because I don't want us to sound like us saying, oh, here's the way one should or shouldn't do them. Only because, in this approach, your desire is already at work, and you're already, your meaning of life is already there. It's not that we have to, find you a meaning of life or give you a meaning of life. Your meaning of life is already expressing itself, and maybe in an unhealthy way. I guess thinking about Paul Tillich, when he talks about ultimate concern, he says that all of us have an ultimate concern. All of us, we're drawn by beauty, by truth, by justice. We're driven by questions. So if you're constantly questioning the meaning of life, then you're driven by truth. You've really got an ultimate concern for truth. If you're really caught up in art and beauty, or going towards, beauty, there's an ultimate concern for beauty. Or if you get really frustrated about things in the world, about how the world's going, whatever your political opinion is, if you get very frustrated with, then you've got an ultimate concern for justice. Now, these can all have unhealthy ways of expressing themselves, but your ultimate concern is already at work. And so for me, it's like, okay, we start there and we go, okay, how can that ultimate concern continue to thrive in a way that doesn't cause you suffering? So for example, justice is a good one, because people watch Instagram, they get really annoyed with political figures, they get really annoyed with people because they think the person is being unjust, right? And you go, okay, well, there's something beautiful there. You've got an ultimate concern for justice. Now, you may not, but you might be expressing it, like you might not have an education that allows you to really understand the political stuff well enough. So maybe you want to go and study that. Maybe you want to go and study political science, or maybe you want to start a group where you have political discussions and find a way to express that. But it's almost like all of us already, our meaning is expressing itself. And the key that I think we're talking about here is it doesn't have a foundation. You don't have to kind of go, is my meaning of life right or wrong? It's exactly. Just there.
That's the point. That's really the point, I think, is that's the thing. It isn't a right or wrong question. It is whatever your desire is, and coming to working out what that is. Is a really important thing. That was one of the first things that I sort of came to terms with when I was working out of more traditional versions of Christianity. It's like, well, wait a minute, these aren't my concerns. I'm being told these should be my concerns, but they're really not. And then trying to find a way to be, overcome your own self-doubt, and go and find enough within you to go, oh, no, I need to follow this, because actually this is where my desire, my true my desire lies.
Yes.
It doesn't lie here.
Yeah.
That's great for you. If that's your concern, more power to you.
Yes.
But here is where my desire is,
Yes.
And one of the problems with foundationalism is it kind of narrows down your world. And I think this is a problem a lot of people have when they reach that point with something like religion, where they go, but I feel disconnected from the thing that's supposed to be making me feel fulfilled. In fact, it's oppressing me. And you see, people talking about, oppression, religious oppression or trauma and stuff like that. And a lot of it is you've discovered what your desire is, and it isn't this.
Yes. And desire, like in this kind of like world where we discover a kind of our freedom and this anxiety, the kind of idea is that our desire is intimately connected with the desire of the other. That the reason why there isn't a foundation is because you learn what you desire by looking at what your parents desire and how their desire functions. And we start to desire, when we love somebody, we start to find ourselves like being interested in what they're interested in. And so desire is connected to other people's desire, which is connected to other people's desire. And you don't, if you go back far enough, find an atom of desire, somebody who literally just knows what they desire without it being connected to anybody else. So in that kind of lattice work of desire, you go, there's no foundation, there's no kind of like substantive whatever, but I've grown up in an environment where I've been formed and forged by, and it's beautiful. It's like I have been created and recreated by the people around me and their desires. I then countersign that desire. So I know, in a sense, I kind of come to take responsibility for the desires that I find within myself. And this is very key for Lacan, which I think is really interesting. Is he says that guilt. At one point, he says this kind of guilt is a sign of a desire that you have given up. So weirdly, like even, a silly example, but if you get stopped by the police and you feel guilty, you haven't done anything wrong, you haven't speeded, but they've pulled you over and you feel this guilt, it's because maybe potentially you want to speed, right? Yeah, but you haven't, right? So you're guilty because you're guilty not for something you've done. Weirdly, you're guilty for something you haven't done but you kind of want to do. But so sometimes when you think about guilt, why am I feeling guilty? The guilt is connected to a desire that's been repressed and then comes up in an unhealthy way. So maybe you feel guilty even though you've been faithful to your partner all the time, but you weirdly feel guilty that you're a bad person. Am I a bad person? Am I a bad person? And you're not a bad person. But maybe, there's a repressed desire to be bad, to kind of tell that person to piss off and that you don't like them and I want to go off and explore the world.
Totally.
It's so hidden from you that it only manifests as an affect, which is, am I a bad person? And the point is not then you suddenly go off and, break up with the person and travel the world. But the first thing is you start to admit to certain desire for freedom.
You have to pay attention to your desire.
And then when you pay attention to that desire, you can find sometimes a healthy way to orient yourself to it, which maybe does allow you, maybe you break up with the person, but maybe you don't, maybe you go, listen, I think we need to move, I think we need to travel, I think we need to shake things up, whatever it is. But that guilt of, am I a bad person, when you're obviously objectively not, can be a signpost of a repressed desire. And again, the interesting thing is not to find a foundation for this desire or whatever, but to go, no, you already are full of desires and enjoyments, and again, a ultimate concern. Like that was the big thing about Tillich, which I like, is pre-Tillich, religious experience was something somebody had on occasion, right? You went up to the mountaintop, or you took ayahuasca, whatever. You had a religious experience, so it happened occasionally, whatever. But for Paul Tillich, no, religious experience is happening to everybody all the time, everywhere, because it's not an experience of something; it's an experience of nothing, which is ultimate concern. A desire is for what you do not have. So ultimately, we all have a sense of longing. We all have a sense of something we do not have. And for Paul Tillich said that, he says that's the religious experience, and it's not something to overcome, it's something to bring to the surface
Yeah.
and enjoy and find a way to express.
Yeah, that's kind of a great summation of the initial question, really. Is, what do you do after the death of God? You got to listen to and come to terms with your own desire.
Yes.
That's the nub,
Yes.
really. And I think that's hopefully what we're trying to do in the things that we talk about and bring to people and bring to ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, the first work.
Yes.
The first work is
absolutely.
Hello.
Yeah, I know.
But,
Dr. Heal Yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Because we're not telling. Well,
Yeah.
we're not telling people how to live. We're just throwing out some conversations about maybe how not to live.
Yes. No, that's right. And,
I think that is the challenge, really, isn't it? In the modern world, is how not to live.
Yeah.
Is the key.
Yeah.
It's the negation of the sort of surface level ways of life that we're told are the paths to fulfillment.
Yes.
That you need to go climb Everest.
Yeah. And this is then like the work that we're doing, because this can sound quite abstract, quite difficult, whatever, but is to go, there's various people in various fields who are providing technologies that allow us to do this. So psychoanalysis is a technology that is designed to help you do this, et cetera, What we're interested in is a liturgy, a practice, a religious practice, in a sense that also helps you do this, where you don't need to know the theory, you don't need to go all deep into this stuff, but through art and music and literature and poetry is brought together into a space of an hour, and that you maybe participate in once a week or once a month or 6 times in a year, but a liturgy that enables you to enter into this experience we're talking about, invites you to incarnate it, and that's the kind of work that we're interested in. And so that's the work.
That's the work.
That's the work. Any final thoughts? I thought you summed it up very well there. So
no.
Brilliant. Okay, well,
end on a low note.
End on a low, And here we're doing a retreat in October. If you see this and you want to, the retreat in October is where we want to train leaders in how to do this, how to help draw people into this experience. So if you're interested in that, and we do regular retreats, because you might be watching this years from when we recorded it, but there's also lots of free stuff. I mean, most of what we do is free. You find it on YouTube, find it on podcasts, so hopefully you can join us either on Zoom rooms and the various things that we do, watch these videos, or join us whenever we do live stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the live events that we do is that it is an opportunity to talk in real time with fellow travelers, people sort of at various stages of trying to work out what to do then.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Have a good day.
Yep.
Bye-bye.